What is going on? It is Nate the Game Guy coming back with another video at hand, and today I want to talk to you guys about how I play Super Famicom games on my Super Nintendo. No hacks, no mods, right? So there's several reasons as to why you may want to be playing some Super Famicom games on your Super Nintendo, simply just because, maybe the games are cheaper on Super Famicom than on the Super Nintendo. Maybe there's some games on the Super Famicom that never made it onto the Super Nintendo. Whatever your reason is, this is going to be the video for you, showing you how I do just that without any mods, hacks, and you just don't have to import a Super Famicom to play some of these games. So without further ado, let's jump right into this video's topic right after the intro. Alright, so let's talk about as to why someone may not want to use mods or hacks when it comes to playing region-locked games on whatever console it may be, right? So, as a game collector, I like to have all my consoles be as authentic as possible. I don't want to do any tinkering to them that changes their overall original layout. I want them to be just like they came out of the package back in 1991, where I got it hooked up to the TV, and it's just that, right? I want it to be as authentic and as original as I can possibly have it be. So with the case of Super Famicom games, they come in different cartridges that are different compared to the Super Nintendo. If you look at the Super Nintendo games, you will see that there are these little grooves right here, and these little grooves are to help the cartridges fit into place when you pop this in to your Super Nintendo. Meanwhile, if you look at your Super Famicom, they do not have these little things right there for the grooves to fit in. So a lot of people will do, when it comes to kind of changing around their Super Nintendo, obviously these aren't mods, but you get the general idea. This is just one method of doing it. They will just do is they will remove those grooves on the inside of the Super Nintendo, and then there you go. You get to be able to play Super Famicom games. I don't want to do that. It's because of, simply as stated from before, I want my consoles to be as original and as authentic as possible. Sure, you could also do is purchase a Super Famicom and have it imported here, but of course that's more expensive than what I'm going to show you in this video, which doesn't require any mods or hacks. But don't get me wrong, I would love to add a Super Famicom to my game collection sometime in this video. But of course, before I get sidetracked too much, let me talk to you guys about what I recommend doing instead. So what do I recommend when it comes to playing some of those Super Famicom games on your Super Nintendo that don't require any tinkering, modding, or hacking, or doing whatever to your Super Nintendo? Here's what I recommend: the Super Cartridge Converter. Now, what's really awesome about this product is it is essentially a cartridge that you pop in to the top of your Super Nintendo, and it kind of works like the Sonic and Knuckles cartridge on the Genesis, only you're not going to be playing as Knuckles in Sonic 1, 2, and 3, but instead what you are going to do once you pop this thing into your Super Nintendo is not only are you going to get access to some of your Super Nintendo games that you have already, but you are finally going to be able to play some of those Super Famicom games on your Super Nintendo without having to take the thing apart, without having to import a Super Famicom to play some of those Famicom games. You just buy this little thing that's not super expensive, and you get to just pop it in and just play some of those Super Famicom games. Of course, I'll give you a link in the description down below where you guys can order one of these off of Amazon. Thankfully, they're not really expensive, so they are pretty accessible to you guys. But of course, as you guys can tell, I still have the original packaging for it. Is just because that's just something I just like doing, me personally. Once I'm done playing with it, I just put this thing right back into the package, and it just looks nice. That's just something that I do. That's just something you don't have to do. But this is what I recommend for you guys to check out when it comes to playing some of those Super Famicom games on the Super Nintendo. But of course, while on the subject of Super Famicom games, let's talk about some Super Famicom games that I personally enjoy, that I recommend. So, I want to start off by saying that I don't have very many Super Famicom games, but that doesn't necessarily mean I don't have games to recommend overall. I'm going to start off things pretty strong by recommending the Puyo Puyo games. For those that have been following my channel for quite a while now, you should already know that I am a fan of the Puyo Puyo series. Now, thankfully, the Puyo Puyo series has been gaining more popularity in the States, thanks to Puyo Puyo Tetris, but I still consider the franchise to be a relatively underrated game franchise overall, and thankfully, when it comes to games that I can recommend for the Super Famicom to play on your Super Nintendo, I have to talk about the Puyo Puyo games. The Puyo Puyo games are really fun games, where essentially you have like these little blobs called Puyos, and when you match the colors into 4, they create a chain. The objective of Puyo Puyo is to create as many chain reactions by stacking your Puyos strategically to where they will create a lot of chain reactions, and then it will send junk Puyo to your opponent, and the opponent can also do the same thing to you. And obviously, you don't want to have all the junk Puyo, you want your opponent to have all the junk Puyo, because that's how you're going to grab that W. I strongly recommend that you guys play these games. It does take quite a bit of a learning curve, but I do have to say that these are some really fun puzzle games, and I will say that they are very competitive too. So if that is your thing as well, you may want to take a look into some of these games. Now, sticking to the theme of puzzle games, I do want to talk about Panel de Pon. This is a game that a lot of people recommend quite frequently when it comes to Super Famicom games that are worth playing. For good reason too. It is a really fun puzzle game where, obviously, unlike Puyo Puyo, it's not as competitive, and yeah, you are trying to have a little bit of some chain linking here and there, but it is a little bit more of trying to rack up those points, trying to get as many taken care of within a certain amount of time. And I have to say that Panel de Pon is very fun. For those that have played Pokemon Puzzle League on the Nintendo 64, it follows the exact same gameplay format, except you don't have Ash and Pikachu and all the other Pokemon characters. This is where Pokemon Puzzle League got its gameplay from. Kind of think of it as Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine and Kirby's Avalanche with the Puyo Puyo skin, except obviously it's with Panel de Pon and all that. But of course, Panel de Pon is a really fun puzzle game, which thankfully isn't very rare, isn't very expensive. I personally picked my copy up from a local game store for like $5-8 if I remember correctly, so not very expensive. But I will say, if you are looking for a really fun puzzle game that's not as competitive as Puyo Puyo, I would strongly recommend that you guys check out Panel de Pon on the Super Famicom. Now, a few things that I also recommend considering when it comes to playing Super Famicom games on the Super Nintendo is that there are some Super Famicom games that are cheaper to buy than on the Super Nintendo. So for example, I personally haven't been looking at pricing lately, so the pricing could be going up or down on this, but I've seen in some cases where games such as Chrono Trigger are cheaper to buy on the Super Famicom than on the Super Nintendo. So that might be something you guys may want to think about too when it comes to playing some of those Super Famicom games on the Super Nintendo, because some games that normally would be expensive on the Super Nintendo might be a little less if you were to buy their Japanese counterparts. And of course, with the product that I recommended earlier from before, that will help you, might save you a little bit of some money if, you still want to play on some authentic Nintendo-based hardware without having to go down any other routes. That might be something that you guys may want to take into consideration when it comes to trying out some of those Super Famicom games on the Super Nintendo. Alright, and that'll conclude my video on how I play Super Famicom games without any modding or hacking or tinkering whatsoever to my Super Nintendo. What do you guys think? Did you find any of the information to be informative, helpful, entertaining, all that wonderful stuff? feel free to comment in the comment section down below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Of course, please do consider giving this video a like. Helps boost it up into the YouTube algorithm so more viewers such as you can find videos just like this. Of course, please do consider subscribing because I post a ton of content when it comes to game collecting tips, and other video game related subjects. So if that is something that you guys are into, please do consider subscribing. But if you're going to subscribe, don't forget to hit that bell notification button so that way you will be notified when I upload a video just like this. I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.